It is Friday, June 10th. Let's talk PlayStation. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We've got a very bizarre week that played out. We're in that not E3 time frame, and usually during that time we have a lot of leaks and rumors. And at least for this week, this was a good example. So a lot to go over. But first, as always, our June PS Plus reminder. So those games are now live. Make sure you grab them. That's Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, Naruto, and also the 2018 God of War. Now, for our first story, let's talk about the new logo that Ben Studio revealed during one of the recent live streams. The live stream was purely for this logo, which was quite interesting. But it's a nice, new, updated logo, very modern. The mythology behind this one is more so to have it be more modular, and so with that silhouette, they can apply it in a lot of different ways. But over on the PlayStation blog, this is where we got some small insight into Ben Studio's new project, where the community manager for Ben Studio, Kevin McAllister, said, and I quote here, "Today we are excited to share just a snippet of news on our current project. We are currently working on a new IP that includes multiplayer and builds upon the open world systems of Days Gone, but brings you a whole new world that we are extremely excited to craft for you. We cannot wait to reveal it to you when the time is right." Now, most of that we did already know before. It's a new IP based on the open world systems of Days Gone, but this is the first time we're hearing that it will include multiplayer of some kind, and that's the key differentiator here. It includes multiplayer, so this is not something where it's another live service game or a full-blown multiplayer project. And for those that remember when they were making Days Gone and also looking at possibly doing a sequel, that was always on the docket. They wanted to do multiplayer or a co-op component of some kind. So it seems like the interest has always been there for Ben Studio, and at least for this upcoming new IP, it seems the commitment is now finally there to go ahead and do that. So still going to be a bit until we see this game, but at the very least, we now have one extra piece of info regarding what the game might potentially have. Moving on to our next news story. This one is not at all surprising, given that we just talked about this during Sony's last fiscal report, where in terms of console sales, PS5 reached 19.3 million units, and it wasn't going to take very long to reach 20, which PS5 recently did. So they're now at 20 million consoles sold worldwide. Now, if you remember during that last fiscal report, we talked about how PS5 was falling behind PS4 in terms of rate of sale and launch aligned, and at least looking at the 20 million milestone being reached, for PS4, that took around 15 months and 14 days. But for PS5, it took, as of today, or at least a few days ago, 18 months and 22 days. So nearly 4 months of a gap there. But if we're looking at like total consoles sold, PS4 is now a few million more ahead. But the perception of the difference in the buying experience is just, it's so different, right? And I think I've said this before, but it's like, there's some sort of alternate timeline out there somewhere where there was no COVID, there was no supply chain issues, and so Sony could make as many PS5s as they could, and they could sell as many as they want. And just out of pure curiosity, I wish we could see what that number really is, because looking back at PS4, I mean, it was not even remotely close to like this difficult to buy one. By the time it was the second quarter of 2014. If you wanted a PS4 back then, you could have gotten one. But we're a year and a half into PS5. It's not that far behind PS4. It's sold, nearly the same amount, and the buying experience is just not even close to the same. So I'm sure Sony could sell a lot more PS5s if they could, but we know that's not the circumstance that we have today. It is unfortunately being held back by the supply chain issues. Now, before we get into the far less interesting news stories, I think we should just cover this right now, because it's really not going to get much better after this, which I'm talking about the undeniable 2022 Game of the Year, Stray. So for this game, recently it had kind of a mini press event where it wasn't like a hands-on thing, but it was something where there was a live demonstration of multiple levels for the press, and so a lot of sites posted their impressions, which we won't really dive into the minutia of like what was shown or what was said. Across the board, the impressions seem largely positive, and that's not even remotely close to surprising. But what I did want to go over was some additional details that Annapurna Interactive shared through a press release and over on Twitter. So In terms of the price, if you're not going to be subscribed to PS Plus Extra or Premium, because remember the game is launching on that as well, you can buy it for $30. Totally fair price in my opinion. If anything, they could have easily tacked on a few more zeros and gotten away with it completely. But besides that, we did also see that it is getting a physical run, and it's something where it's not like a limited release, open pre-order, then it's a cutoff. It looks like it will go to retail from IM8-bit, so that's great news as well. Really pleased to see that. But over on Twitter, Annapurna Interactive did confirm that for the game's overall length, it's around 8 hours long, and it could be longer if you're picking up all the collectibles and presumably doing everything in the game. And they did also confirm it's the adventure of this particular cat, so no customization, which a lot of people were asking for. And I wasn't really expecting that, but that would have been pretty cool actually, to have like different cat presets to fit a cat that you may have at home, or even just a crude little like paint setting where you can set it to a certain color, like black perhaps. But that's okay. I am going to be totally on board with this cat in particular. And the length of the game, now all joking aside, the length is longer than I thought, actually. That sounds great. And I don't know about you, but I love these very polished, high-quality, smaller-scale games where they're in the neighborhood of like 8 to 12 hours. I always love jumping into this stuff when I'm done with like a 60 to 100-hour game. Like almost always, if I play something that big and large, right after I almost always have to jump into something that's on the smaller side. And so regardless, I was going to play Stray no matter what I was doing at the time, but I will say I feel like this game could easily fit into a lot of other people's habits. And so with that, Stray is coming very soon, and if it wasn't obvious, I might be a little bit excited for it. Anyway, moving on to our next news story. This one is... Actually, this is kind of a big deal because we don't normally see this nowadays when it comes to PlayStation news, but recently a brand new Twitter account popped up, and it turns out they were very, very accurate with leaking Sony's State of Play right before it went live. The Twitter account @insider_WTF posted this tweet on June 2nd, where it's one image showing all the release dates, all the announcements. It's all there, beat for beat. It's all correct. And because how they went about doing it, where it's all in one image, it's undeniably accurate because it's not quite like what we normally see with other, insider Twitter accounts where they're not really insiders. That's such a dumb word nowadays. It's not that. It's not a thread from the subreddit Gaming Leaks and Rumors where it has to be vetted through mods. It's not this random picture circulating from 4chan, and it's certainly not what John Cartwright did when he was experimenting with that Waddle Dee Knows Twitter account where he sent out a bunch of separate tweets and deleted the ones that were wrong, right? It's not that. It's all in one image, and that's the really shocking, surprising thing after that State of Play aired and we were able to validate that, oh my gosh, this account did get everything correct. And you can see how they're kind of having fun with it with their account name, their profile picture, and also their Twitter header image, which showcases abandoned. And keep in mind that's not meant to be a hint, because if you didn't see the news, we didn't cover it here, but GameSpot's Mark Delaney recently ran a piece on what went down with Abandoned. The game's not in active development. There's obviously, it's kind of a weird scam situation going on. There's a private group, and it's a weird, toxic back and forth with fans. That's a whole thing. We're not going to get into it here, but just bear in mind, it's they're more or less joking on this Twitter account. But with that said, Sony takes leaks very seriously. The last time we had something like this was Navtra on Reset Era, and they had to go away because it sounded like they were, playing a little too fast and loose with what they were doing. And so this does not happen very frequently at all. And so with this account popping up, now people are of course looking at what else they were sending out on Twitter. So before we look at the rest of their tweets, it's probably best if we move on to our next story because it all kind of rolls into one here and it's all connected, so let's do that. Going into our next story, it's about Hideo Kojima's next project, or I should say one of his projects, because we know that one of them is very likely to be a sequel to Death Stranding. The other one, it looks like that also recently leaked as well. So there's kind of a timeline here that we should follow, at least in the way that I think most people probably saw this, so that's how we'll do it. Initially, this started from the freelance writer Tom Henderson, where he wrote a piece for tryhardguides.com revealing Hideo Kojima is working on a horror game called Overdose. Apparently, early footage was sent to Tom showing the actress Margaret Qualley, who played Mama in Death Stranding. She's wearing a blue dress, walking through dark corridors with a flashlight in third person. The game can be played in first person too, apparently. And a jump scare happens that shows the screen game over, followed by a Hideo Kojima game, and then overdose. After this was published, Kojima Productions requested the article be taken down, which Tom Henderson then denied given the circumstance. Now, this is where the story became well known given Tom's larger presence on Twitter, but XDOS1S on Twitter and YouTube seemingly put out this info earlier, including an off-screen shot of the footage. And the new Twitter account we just talked about at insider_WTF, they also sent out a tweet teasing overdose and even responding to Jeff Keighley referencing the game over screen, as we heard from Tom Henderson's report. So it does seem like this info did reach a few people, unless there is some kind of crossover going on behind the scenes that we can't see, but otherwise it does seem like a handful of people did know. And that's pretty much it so far. So you can see how there are some layers to this one where we have that new Twitter account, which it seems as though they have a more of a lean towards PlayStation Insight with not only the state of play, but they also sent out a tweet for The Last of Us Part 1, which we'll talk about very soon. But there was that, which led some people to think that, okay, perhaps because that account is leaning towards PlayStation News, which, it would be a reasonable assumption to think that somebody wouldn't know things going on between all platform holders unless they were a journalist of some kind where they're, actively chasing these stories, right? More often than not, if somebody's working at a developer or a publisher or on the corporate side of things, you're not going to be privy to what the other platform holder is doing, or at least in most cases you're not going to be. So some are thinking that maybe this game actually is going to release on PlayStation in some way because no platforms were initially specified from Tom Henderson's report. But the other thing is that XDOS1S, that is more of an Xbox-leaning Twitter account and YouTube channel, and they also had info on The Last of Us as well. So there's some kind of source out there that is willing to, put this stuff out there for whatever this random Twitter account is, that YouTube channel, and of course Tom Henderson, where they're actively seeking out this info to post it as a story. So we don't really have much here to go on. The initial gut reasonable reaction would be that this is Kojima's Xbox project, because remember, it's well known at this point that he has multiple projects going on, and we see that one of them is very likely a PlayStation Studios game because Sony owns that property, and there's really no denying how Norman Reedus went about talking about this. I mean, it's something where that's likely happening, right? So we already have a PlayStation project going on, so this could very well be the Xbox project that has been rumored for a bit. But again, platforms aren't specified. We don't know where this game is showing up. It could, if anything, be shown very soon at the Xbox showcase, which that would be the place to do it. It would be a huge announcement for Microsoft, and that makes sense to a degree, but it's still not confirmed just yet, right? He could very well have 3 projects going on, right? Just based on, how Microsoft went about, or at least the ongoing rumor for that Xbox project where he signed a letter of intent, and that was like the last meaningful update, that the letter was signed and that it's still on, right? I mean, who knows how quickly they can get something off the ground to at least show and announce, but considering this did leak so soon and right next to the Summer Game Fest showcase, it seems like an announcement would be imminent, so we'll have to wait and see. But that whole thing was kind of wild how this all played out, and so I can't speculate too much because for all I know what I'm saying is going to be outdated by the time this is uploaded. Now, in the spirit of leaks, we have yet another one where, again, going back to that Twitter account, their most recent tweet was a very slight but rather obvious tease for The Last of Us Part 1, where they say Part 1 coming September 2nd, 2022, emojis for what you would assume is PS5 and PC, and, that was their last tweet, right? So there's not much else we can say there for that account, but of course we'll watch it if anything happens. But really this was leaked from PlayStation themselves, like an hour and a half or 2 hours before the Summer Game Fest showcase, where PlayStation Direct had the listing go live for The Last of Us Part 1, the full shebang, the standard edition, the Firefly edition, the screenshots, the trailer, it all went up right before the showcase, and well, that's where we can just go into the formal announcement. So during the Summer Game Fest showcase, it was the closing announcement where Neil Druckmann took the stage next to Jeff Keighley to announce the Part 1 remake, and of course we've known about this for quite a long time now, and well, at least it's nice to finally have it confirmed. So let's go over some of the details. It's I mean, a lot of it is what we already heard about, right? So this is a remake of the game, not a remaster. The best way to describe it is that this is more or less the first game with Part 2's visuals and gameplay. Gameplay being a pretty big differentiator here, so improved controls, expanded accessibility options, of course 3D audio, haptics, adaptive triggers, things like that, and it is coming September 2nd with a PC version confirmed as well in development, so not quite day and date, but PC should be shortly after. And the game comes in a Standard Edition, Digital Deluxe Edition, and Firefly Edition. The Standard Edition will include both the main story and Left Behind. All versions have Left Behind. The MSRP in North America is indeed $69.99, so a very Sony move there. The Digital Deluxe Edition, as expected, has a bunch of early unlocks. And the Firefly Edition, same thing, but that will also include a steelbook and the Last of Us American Dreams comics 1 through 4 with new cover art. And that retails for $99.99, only available from PS Direct, which as of right now is already showing out of stock. And that's more or less everything that we know so far, which, I mean, that's plenty. The game's coming out very soon anyway, in 3 months, which is, it's always refreshing to have a game get announced and coming out very soon. And the rumor prior was that the game was launching by the end of this year, so it's not like you can do like a stealth drop during a PlayStation September showcase. So it seemed likely that it was going to get announced soon. It's nice to see that it's finally out there, and also something where the initial trailer is, it shows a lot, right? Various areas in the game, so if you've played it before, you can easily recognize different areas and do that before and after. Even on the PS blog, Sony's doing that for you, where you can see what is the actual visual difference for, these character models and the environments, which, goes a long way. We saw this when it was a rumor. We're seeing it now. A lot of people are asking, was this really necessary? And I mean, sure, it wasn't, but you have to remember the context of how this game came to be. Sony didn't necessarily want it in the first place. It was and remember, this was a alleged story on Bloomberg, so assuming it's true, it was something where the Visual Arts Service Group wanted to make their own game, so a small team started working on a project. They looked at remaking Uncharted 1, realized it would take too much, then they moved on to The Last of Us, which they began working on that. At a certain point, Herman Hulst came in and looked at it and said, why is this so expensive? I guess they decided to greenlight it on a probationary period, and then thought, okay, if we're going to really do this, let's hand it over to Naughty Dog. Some of that staff can work on that while they're also getting ready to, really launch a full-scale project next to the Factions team. So that's how it came about. It wasn't necessarily something Sony wanted to do per se, but I mean, having it still looks really, really good. And, it's got Part 2's gameplay, which I think is one of the bigger parts of this, right? Assuming you can crouch and have more of the intelligent AI really seek and hunt you out, and if the gunplay feels like Part 2, I think that alone is a really good selling point. And yeah, obviously the price is not fun either, but as I always caution, wait for a sale. I can't see this game staying $70 for very long, at least when it comes to physical at retail. I mean, of course, if you're on a PS5 digital edition, then I wish I had better advice for you, but this is kind of why I recommend against that console, because you're beholden to publisher sales on that one storefront, so you're kind of stuck there. But besides the whole pricing thing and going back to visuals, this is something where a lot of the comparisons right now are the cutscenes, which you have to remember on PS3, all those cutscenes are pre-rendered videos, which that's why they look as good as they do on PS3, and at least for the PS4 version, that game also looks very good because of things like, high frame rate, high resolution. I'm sure they increased the foliage and vegetation, but and also the texture resolution, but that game under the hood is principally a PlayStation 3 game. I think the big differences are really going to set in when it comes to actually playing the game and seeing the environments, right? It might be a dramatic difference and it will look absolutely gorgeous, but outside of just pure visuals, it will play like Part 2, and I think that's going to be a key differentiator, and that's what will make this the most ideal definitive way to play this game, and also being available on PC as well. So it's going to reach a lot more people. It's just, I'm excited. I mean, I love the game, and the last time I played it was, I don't know, maybe like 5-6 years ago. Like I'll replay it again, especially a full-blown remake. But, if you do have that fatigue, if you're not into it, then by all means skip it. It is kind of more of a filler title in between some of the bigger things that we're expecting later this year and also going into next year. So for the time being, at least, it is a really nice upcoming September release. And I can only speak for myself, but I'm excited. Now, having said all that, this was not the only announcement that Neil Druckmann brought to the Summer Game Fest showcase. We have more Last of Us news, like for example Part 2. We have some updated sales figures here where the game sold 10 million copies as of spring this year, which is a huge milestone. We often see for a lot of these AAA first-party PlayStation Studio games that over time they do very well. And so initially this game did, 4.5 million copies shortly after launch, and then of course we see over time it creeps up to 10 million, so I'm sure Naughty Dog is quite happy with that, so congratulations to the whole team. But the really interesting piece of news here is that we finally have an update on factions, which it's not the most revealing update per se, but at least it's the most meaningful one we've had so far, where Neil Druckmann shares some concept art, and he does promise an update next year, not this year. So that's, unfortunate, but hopefully we'll have a proper reveal sometime during Q1 of next year, and that will maybe dictate a Q3 release, which, it's far away, but at the very least, they keep pointing out over and over again, it's a very large-scale, standalone multiplayer project. And this concept art, while it is concept art, we can spot a few details, like for example, it's San Francisco. It's a very large map. We can see some infected. We can also see a cloud of spores coming in, which, some are theorizing that could be a, battle royale mechanic. The thing is, at this point, I would be shocked if this game wasn't some sort of like, Division-esque game where you could actually, in theory, play it alone if you wanted to, but it's best played with a handful of people going through this large city and, fulfilling quests and things like that. We'll see the game soon enough, but still nice to have our first meaningful update in a long time. As for the Last of Us HBO TV series, we got some info here. The last day of filming is actually today, so they're pretty much done after this Friday, and the show is still planned to come next year. And the way that Neil was phrasing this, he made it seem like they were going to show something very soon, as in maybe a rough cut teaser trailer. Maybe it won't take that long to have them make something to show to the public, so that's an exciting prospect. They did share a new still, which if you crank up the exposure on the still, we finally have our first look at a clicker, which can't see too much, but that's what's really getting me excited, which I haven't been excited for like a TV show in a long time, so that's actually really cool. But we did also see the announcement here that Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson, they both have roles in this show as well, which it's not a slight cameo or something like that, or a nod to the camera. It's some kind of major role. They both have 2 major roles, and who knows what that could be, considering they're not going to reprise the roles of Joel and Ellie, so this could really go in any direction, to the point where it's certainly going to be what would be considered, new content or new story elements that we didn't see in the game. So that's also very exciting to think about. The possibilities there are certainly endless. Now, Jeff Keighley did ask Neil Druckmann, what is he working on? As in, Neil at this point already named off a bunch of directors for multiple projects, but what is he working on? And of course, he wasn't going to answer, but he did, more or less confirm, like, yeah, I'm doing something at the studio, but can't talk about it yet. Didn't say if it was a new IP, an existing franchise. We don't have any of that right now. It's far too soon to say, obviously. It's going to be a while until we have something of substance there, but he did kind of, jokingly say, like, but hey, if somebody at PlayStation wants to leak it, then sure, then I'll talk about it, right? So you gotta feel so bad for the guy in the context of these leaks where it's like, we mentioned earlier, like at Sony, it doesn't really happen that often. This company is so serious about leaks getting out, and they're very secretive, and generally they can hold a pretty tight ship. But it seems like when they do happen, leaks, they hit Naughty Dog. He's got to be annoyed at this point, right? So visibly annoyed. So I feel bad for him in that sense, where it seems like everything they do, it leaks out before they get to announce it on their own terms. But either way, it's, we got a lot of Last of Us news here, and, Naughty Dog news in general, which was refreshing. Not a whole lot to really talk about beyond what we just mentioned, but over time we'll have more, naturally. Moving on to God of War Ragnarok. This game, a lot of people were wondering, was it going to show up at the Summer Game Fest showcase? Maybe a release date trailer announcement, something like that. I'm still expecting a state of play, and that will be aligned with a release date trailer. But besides that, a lot of eyes were wondering, is this game going to show up? And really some, on the surface, bad news popped up instead, where Games Reactor Spain, they posted an article stating that they had various European sources that God of War Ragnarok was going to be delayed to 2023. Now, this was spurred on further by the revelation that the game's release date changed on the PSN backend. As noted by the PlayStation Game Size Twitter account, it was switched from September to the standard December 31st placeholder. But over on Reset Era, Bloomberg's Jason Schreier did initially write in a thread on the topic that, he said, and I quote here, "It's hard to definitely prove a negative, but someone who would know firsthand just told me they haven't heard anything about a slip to 2023, as did somebody else who might know secondhand." Then, again, before the Summer Game Fest aired, he added in the same thread, and I quote here, "Heard from another source this morning that the game is not delayed. As usual, this is not a guarantee that the game will come out in 2022, and video game development is so turbulent that you should never trust a release date until the product in question is in your hands, but this Games Reactor report appears to be false." Also, recent era user Ashong, whom we've discussed before when it came to certain things that they've been privy to with PlayStation, they claim the game was delayed internally, but is still coming this year, sort of implying that the game may not hit the original September date on the PSN backend, and now releasing sometime during the fourth quarter, which would align with why we saw on the PSN backend it was changed. So that's pretty much all we have with God of War Ragnarok. It was maybe delayed, but not really. I think a delay in a lot of people's minds is 2023, and I'm still baffled at how many people think it is going to get delayed. I'm still confident it will launch this year, but if we're looking at from, say, September to possibly October, November, that's not really the worst thing in the world, especially when we never had a public release date in the first place. So if they come out and say, hey, it's coming out in November, that's how you know they feel confident that they're going to be hitting that date. And again, they had the tenacity to somehow think it was going to launch in 2021. I just can't see how they would then go all the way into 2023. Certainly possible, but even if it does, we're looking at Q1 2023, which is not really going to be the worst thing in the world either. But as of right now, it looks like Ragnarok is still on track for some time this year. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter, and if you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it's very easy. You can follow the link down below. Supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and now announce the winner next week because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories that I wanted to talk about with you all from this past week. Our Tuesday video was trophy hunting some PS1 games on PS5 now that they're finally here. Obviously, I had to go and check those games out and play them at length, and so go check out my playthroughs of Ape Escape, Siphon Filter, and Hot Shots Golf all in one, trophy playthrough video like I normally do. So that was Tuesday, and coming up, of course, we have the North America launch, and that's where we should have a full 700 plus game library. So of course we will be taking a look at that on Monday, but that will likely be our Tuesday upload. So until then, that's it. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.